Good evening.
Good evening.
How are we doing?
I'm all right, thank you. It's back to just being the two of us tonight.
It is.
We're going to miss our friends from last week,
I
aren't we?
know, wasn't it lovely?
It was great.
I really loved it.
They did
last
really
week.
well, didn't they?
They did. I mean, they were so natural.
Yeah.
There was no nerves.
No, just out of a job.
I know.
If
You never
if
know.
we had one.
Do you know what? It made me think I love it when there's more of us around the table because I
Yeah,
love
yeah, it
hearing
was good.
other people's stuff. So
And
I
it means we
reckon-
don't have to talk as much, doesn't it?
we need to get some others on.
We do. Maybe we need some
do.
volunteers, don't we? Or we'll go picking from a list.
Let's go tap some people on the
I
shoulder.
think we should.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, what are we bringing to the table tonight?
Well, you've brought a topic to share, motivated, I thought you said, by reading a bit of a book. Did you finish the book?
No,
You haven't yet. Oh, okay.
I haven't.
So the book is an old one.
Yeah.
It's one I passed on to Richard, and he then said it was really good, and he's passed it on to
Yep.
you, or I've passed it back to you.
Yep.
And it's called No Compromise, and it's about a chap called Keith Green,
Mm-hmm.
who was a musician, singer, years and years ago, back in the 80s, 70s, 80s kind of era.
Yeah.
But radical faith and sold out for Jesus, quite a conversion story.
Yeah.
And he was, the book had such an impact on me. I mean, my boys read it as well. So I think we've all read it as a family over which is rare for us. We don't normally pass books around.
I
like that.
love that.
Yeah.
Whole family read the same
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
That's awesome.
It was really profound, and I think just the fact that this guy was sold out for Jesus was really inspiring. But there was a particular angle on it that caught your attention.
Yeah. The grace of God. So I'm only I think I'm in chapter 7 or chapter 8.
Okay.
I picked it up and within about 2 days I was like, boom, straight in. This weekend's been crazy. Not had the chance to pick it up because
Yeah.
I've been trying to be good. Because when I was still reading at midnight the other night, I thought,
Okay.
love, put the book
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Or at least turn the light off so Andy can go to sleep.
Are you joking me? I literally have to stay there with literally the light on my phone shining
Do you?
to the one page. Oh, Andy literally has
Wow.
to sleep in the dark.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, well, no,
Totally.
Judith's worse. I think she needs it pitch black, and yeah.
That's Andy.
Okay.
So if he's fallen asleep,
Yeah.
I can just about get away with having the torch on, but I've got to hold
Okay.
it so close to
Yeah.
the book that there is nothing else
So
around.
years ago, before Kindles, I had a little clip-on light that came over the top of the book, and you could dim it. It was really cool.
Really?
Yeah, really cool.
So I had one that you couldn't dim, but it was really irritating because the battery seemed to run out every 2 minutes.
No.
So I had to
Oh,
have to
no.
hold it with one hand just close up so I could just read a paragraph at a time, and I
That's
started to
rubbish.
get annoyed with it, so I got
Oh,
rid
dear.
of it. So yes, I'm about chapter 8.
Okay.
And
The book gets better, by the way.
Oh,
So I each time I've read it years ago, I struggled more with the beginning, and then it got
Okay.
better and better.
Oh,
as
well,
I went through,
I've
so-
loved the beginning,
Okay.
so I'm
Well,
well
there you
up for
go
the
then.
rest of it. Amazing. Yeah, so his whole journey with 70s love.
Okay.
Love, freedom,
Right.
drugs, rock and roll, whatever it was, hippie,
Yep.
free kind of living,
Mm-hmm.
and this desperation of a spiritual awakening
Yeah.
that is very not I've never walked this out. So this is a very different way. And to be honest, this is the first time I've really read into and understood that sort of time. Other than not so long ago watching the movie, was it The Love Revolution?
Yes, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, so I
what's that
remember
one? Yeah.
watching a bit of that and having a bit of like, okay, this is
Yeah.
how things were.
Yeah.
But this has really opened my eyes into stuff and just seeing the desperate need between Keith and his wife, Melody, wanting desperately to find something, knowing something was out there,
Yeah.
and they're finding Jesus. Seeing what they went through, reading the things they took, the experiences they had, and seeing Jesus in that has been quite beautiful and quite like, okay, I think you become a Christian, you're walking all of these years later,
Yeah.
and you sometimes just forget those parts of people's journeys, remembering
Yeah.
that part of my own journey. And I think that's just been so beautiful to read and see that in their journey, God's grace over them as they were trying all sorts of stuff to have a spiritual awakening, which ultimately led to Jesus, is quite humbling. It's left me in a place of just going, God, you're awesome, and forgive me that I have forgotten how beautiful you are.
And as you were describing that story, we will talk about grace, but it was the seeking that stood out to me as just as you're unpacking that, and reminded of Jesus' encouragement that if we seek, we will find. If we seek after him, we will find him. And I just wonder if, sadly, we stop seeking when you found him. If actually there's we can too easily become complacent or settled or just busy with other things, because that kind of existential searching, longing has been deeply satisfied. And yet there's still more that we can have of Christ, and more that we can know him. And I wonder if we settle too soon. Very often, I do. I'm aware you're just grateful that you found him or he's found you, and it can happen in a relationship, can't it? Where you take your partner for granted sometimes, and you're grateful you've got them, and life carries on, and you stop doing the things that build and deepen the relationship, and at your detriment. And I suppose it's the same with Christ, that if you stop seeking, you stop finding. Maybe that's why we end up getting too settled.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Not really thought of it like that, but I think you're absolutely right. The desperation.
Yeah.
That more so Keith.
He wasn't
and
he?
I think Melody seemed to kind of journey behind him, but yet still had something within her own self.
And it's interesting, we've had people in church in this last year who've arrived because they've been searching.
Yeah.
And they found Jesus.
Yeah.
Through an earnest, heartfelt, deep search. And it's been young guys.
Amazing.
Which is great and encouraging.
Yeah.
And it matches that story somewhat.
Yeah.
Of that story, doesn't it?
Yeah. And God's grace at meeting people
so
where they're at.
What was it about God's grace that stood out to you? Why that theme particularly?
So I think because I'm reading this really raw, this account of Keith's life from his wife, and actually reading some of his own journaling that they put in the book, the rawness of that, and seeing Jesus insert himself right in the midst of what they were doing.
Okay.
So you're talking drug taking, you're talking living a very different life.
Yeah.
And yet he inserted himself in some of those times that continued to point to him. Even though they weren't always acknowledging him, they knew that there was this bigger thing, this greater thing out there. And almost not wanting to believe Jesus, almost wanting to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
But not wanting to go him. So they were going to try and find it in smoking dope and taking every drug that they could have done to take themselves into those places. They were following the occult. They were following all of these different other practices and kind of almost not wanting to kind of go there. Jesus was sort of there, and they quite liked him and thought he was quite a dude. But something wasn't satisfying them wherever they went. And yet, He's inserted himself in these beautiful ways that continue to make them go, there's something else. This isn't satisfying. This isn't peace. And I was just like, your grace, Lord, in the midst of all of that. I think sometimes we can expect it to be, I've had this moment where I'm asking for forgiveness, and then I've met God, and then I've met Jesus. And
so it was highlighting to you that God's with them on the journey as they're looking for him in all sorts of weird places. He's the one drawing them and leading them.
They didn't have this moment where somebody introduced Jesus to him. the grace of God. And Jesus was, that he kept showing up in little ways that just continued to make them feel that where they were going and what they were doing was not the answer. And that to me blows my mind in a way that, okay, so taking it down to being a parent, you know, you always want to be there to encourage your kids. You want to be there at the sideline saying, I'm here, I'm cheering you on, but you know what, when you're hurt, I'm going to come in. And you're doing all of that. And then this to me blew my mind how actually God was going right into those places to be with them, to reveal, because there's a desperation of the Father to reveal himself to those that are looking. And they weren't even praying. You know, they weren't in this place where they've got this whole Christian kind of jargon or this Christian formulaic thing. They were just going, I'm looking for something.
They were searching.
They were.
They were looking for what was true.
Yes.
And God understood that and saw their hearts and revealed himself to them. As he does all over the world today. And you know, if you when we look at stories of people who are coming from other faith backgrounds into Christianity, the numbers of times we hear of people having visions or dreams of a man in white, and they don't know who this man in white is, but they, you know, some understand it's Jesus, some aren't sure, but repeatedly it's Jesus who's appearing to them in dreams and visions, and it's resulting in them having life-changing encounters with Christ and the gospel, from backgrounds which are very different to Christianity, and it's happening again and again and again all over the world. So it's God's kindness, isn't it?
It's just beautiful.
And I think we've seen that in church life as well, where people have, so there seems to be a difference when you're on a journey towards faith and God turns up again and again and again and is prompting you, leading you. And it's, I think we had the conversation earlier before recording that some of the things people, in quotes, get away with or are practicing or doing are not things that we would recommend. They're not things that God says are okay. They're not healthy. They're not life-giving. And yet it's as if God overlooks all of those as he's drawing somebody, as he's appealing to them, appearing to them. It's as if none of that matters on the way towards him. And yet once they've found him, it's then that their eyes are opened, and it really does matter, all of that stuff. And there's a moving away from that to Christ and afterwards to live for him. And that's an interesting distinction, isn't it? What sort of goes on before coming to Christ and what's permitted after by God's grace.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because if nobody tells you that the way that the thing that you're doing or the thought process you've got isn't helpful and isn't going to bring you life, why would you change it? So his grace of being in that place that says, you don't know, and I'm going to show you a different way. I mean, crikey, how many times is he still showing me a different way after all of these years walking with him? He's drawing you into a place of safety and security and love. But then when you've met with him and you know, I mean, I say you know who he is. We're still learning about who he is, and I don't think we're going to ever stop that until we get to meet with him face to face. There's a beauty in him becoming your parent or your teacher, wanting to teach you a new way, and not a new way because he's a party pooper, but a new way that says, I know what's good for you. I know what is going to produce freedom for you. I know what's going to produce health for you. I know what's going to produce joy and peace for you. We still have a choice. And he's still really, really gracious towards us, even when we do kind of still make the choices to do, even when he's shown us. But I think it costs you a little bit more when you know. I think it costs you to know what he is teaching and know his ways. And I think it costs you a little bit more so than when you don't know and you're learning and he's introducing himself. I mean, so Andy and I, we were learning in our first few years of marriage. I mean, I'd still say we're learning.
Sure.
And marriage gets better each
But
year
you
when
carry
you're
on
learning.
don't you? Yeah.
Absolutely. But there were things that I were going to do that were really going to tick him off and annoy him. And he could have turned around and sacked it and gone, "You're really annoying. I'm done with you." But he loved me enough to kind of want to communicate, and vice versa, which has brought us to 11 years of marriage, and it's going good, and it's growing, and I love it. I mean, times that by millions, and that's just kind of what God is doing with us.
Yeah.
But it would cost me in my marriage if I knew the things that really upset Andy and broke his trust and continue to break his heart. If I continue to do those things, it's going to cost me. It's going to break down our relationship. It's going to break our trust. And eventually it would break our marriage to the point when it couldn't be restored.
Yeah, because now you know what those are.
And I'm doing them on purpose.
Yeah, that's right. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's as if God is prioritizing just the one or two things that really matter.
Yeah.
Which is our relationship with him, us coming to know him. And before we do, that seems to be the one thing he's focusing on again and again and again to help us see that. And perhaps like when you're dealing with a small child and you've got a toddler, and there might be all sorts of things they need to learn, but they don't need to learn them all right away.
Yeah.
You deal with one thing at a time, and
good.
it's the most obvious, most life affirming, or the one thing that's going to stop them getting killed.
Yeah.
You want them to know that to start with.
Yeah.
And that's what you try and train them in and teach them in. So maybe it's that kind of illustration. We're using this word grace a lot. It just occurred to me that the word can be used for people who are graceful and they kind of look elegant. That's not what we're meaning, is it? We're not talking about God's elegance.
Nope.
What are we talking about when we're talking about grace?
That's a good one. What does that mean? What does grace mean?
Because I think when we've just been chatting about this and we've double checked looking at sources, because we know these things, but you want to just double check your facts.
Absolutely.
And you asked a question before we started recording, what's the difference between grace and mercy? And we decided we weren't going to talk about it, which is why I brought it up. Just because they overlap somewhat. And grace seems to be this God giving, this unmerited favour of God, this gift of God that keeps getting used, whether it's salvation or God's kindness towards us, which results in a gift of some kind, him giving himself or giving something. It's this a mercy seems to be God's disposition towards us, that leads then to his grace. It's his compassion that results in his grace. But as we were discussing it, they got quite overlapped, and I suspect we're going to use them both. We're going to use the word grace and mean mercy, but I don't think it matters particularly.
No, absolutely not.
But we're not talking about elegance. We're not talking about God looking nice, though he is glorious. We're talking about the times when we just don't deserve good things from God, and yet he shows up. He's kind.
Yeah.
He's more generous than we can imagine. And is that the sort of thing you mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah? Definitely. And I think for me personally, I had a time where grace was something that was used. Grace was something that I knew until he spoke it to me. Until there was a moment where there was this exchange where he made it very clear, Joita, this is not about what you do for me.
Okay.
This is not about what you do for me to make yourself justified. This is not about what you have to do to receive my love and my grace. You don't have to prove yourself to me. My grace. So
you're suggesting there was a moment when it went from being a word that got bandied around to being something that you experienced and knew. What did that feel like?
Oh my, it wrecked me.
Okay.
And do you know why? Because I don't think... There's a big thing again in the Christian community about it being grace and not works. And
What does that mean?
What does it mean to you? That you're working your worth. So for me, it was almost as if that I needed to show God how serious I was.
Okay.
I wanted to get it right. I wanted to prove to him. God, it's going to make me emotional. to prove to him that I trusted him, prove to him that I believed.
Okay.
To prove to him that I was worthy of him to answer my prayers or to meet with me. And in my late 20s, there was just this beautiful moment where he was just like, it's not about what you do. And I think it was a time where it was almost everything stopped. And I think it was when, and I've shared before about my breakdown, and it's just this beautiful time where he just kept speaking this out because I wasn't doing anything. I was in such a broken place. I wasn't doing anything. And all of a sudden, it was just the revelation. And I honestly believe it was a revelation that was nothing to do with me. It was something that he came and he gave me, that I could see and experience for the first time in my life, that what he has done for me in sending Jesus, he would do for me all the time.
Okay.
It wasn't that he only did that for me if I did all of these things. And I think I was very black and white with myself. I would be really gracious with other people, but when it came to myself, absolutely not, because I needed to prove to God that I was serious. And he just literally wiped that away and was just like, daughter, I'm going to answer your prayers because I love you. Because actually what I see your heart. And I remember a particular situation I hadn't even been thinking about for a while, and he just literally brought to mind a ridiculous thing, but I was waiting and ever hoping that someone would arrive at church that my heart was so for and I longed for. And yet I had this beautiful moment in church where I turned my head randomly to the side, and the Lord said, you know what? I know if that person stood in front of me, I know you'd look past that person, you'd see me, because I know where I am in your heart.
Okay.
And that again just wrecked me.
Yeah.
Again, him just coming to say, I see you and I know you. You don't have to work this for me. My grace is enough for you. Let me show you what my grace is. And then I went through a season of receiving that. It wasn't about me working hard. It wasn't about me reading my Bible every day. It wasn't me about being formulaic. He just kept showing up. I just kept getting a blessing. I had more joy like I'd ever had before. Just, it wasn't about the things that he was doing. There was something he was changing within me that showed me his love and his grace.
Yeah.
He was implanting something in me that blew me away. And I honestly believe from that moment, I have been a changed daughter. I've changed. And it was a revelation of that truth, that his grace is sufficient. His grace is enough. Because it's about him, who he is and what he wants to do, not about me. But yet that also comes with a caveat of that his grace is not sufficient that I can just go and do whatever the heck I want to do.
Okay.
But it gave me a strength and an underpinning that made me confident to want to be uncompromised for him, even though I can fall short at times. He's gracious and loving towards me with that.
And that stayed with you?
Oh, man. I cannot tell you more than I felt like somebody had poured concrete over my feet. And you know, it's like stand on the rock. He is your rock.
Yep.
For me, it was all of a sudden like, not only am I standing on it, but my feet have been so darn cemented into it that I felt so
it's a
solid.
truth that's become unshakable for you.
Solid.
Okay. So have you, sometimes when God gives us a truth, there are times when it does get a bit shaky and you have to go back and remind yourself of that moment and that time. Have you found yourself doing that? Or has it been one of those, no, I know that I know this is, I don't even need to go back there again. It's just...
Okay, so being
or is it a bit of both?
Do you know what? It's rock solid.
Yep.
I think like any times there's the battle of the mind.
Okay.
That sometimes you can have a thought process that you can very quickly kick out and go, no thanks, that's absolute rubbish. or you can allow it to grow and fester. And I would say I've had times where I've had a choice to allow a thought process to fester, or I can kick it. And I think I've learned very quickly to go, no, that's not truth, because of how he's revealed it to me.
Okay.
And I think because it was so impactful,
Yeah.
and it literally has had nothing to do with me. This was a revelation from him that was such a gift. And I think I needed it. Knowing my personality, he knows me well. And I think he gave me a revelation of something that he knew I needed. And to pour cement into that, to keep that, it's just his grace.
Wonderful. And the time you were talking about was a revelation that it was by grace, not by works.
Yeah.
And often that's used about becoming a Christian, about finding faith. So it's the sense that we don't become followers of Jesus as a result of our own efforts. It's all because of God's grace. But actually for you, you were expressing, I think what's perhaps even more common is that somehow once you've made that response to Christ, or if you've grown up in a Christian home, somehow maintaining that is now all about me.
Yeah.
And you were this revelation for you was actually, no, it's still about grace.
Yeah.
It's still God's kindness, and he's holding you. It's his provision.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, it came at a time of comparative weakness.
Yeah.
And we were asking about that verse earlier where Paul's got a thorn in the flesh, hasn't he? And it's, my grace is sufficient for you.
Yeah.
He's told when it's the Apostle Paul has this problem. We're not quite sure what it is. He describes it as a thorn in the flesh, and he prays 3 times for God to take it away. And God says, no, my grace is sufficient. And it's a revelation in weakness of God's provision.
Mm-hmm. And yet he also says, going on that, it says, my power works best in weakness.
And that's your story. You've just testified to that.
It's so true. And I think, knowing me, I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do wonder if my personality could have been about the works. Well, I've done these things, so of course.
Yeah.
And I think very quickly he needed to flip that for me to say, so that I would remember that it's him.
That it's all about him. It's all his kindness, all his goodness.
Yeah.
And it's nothing that we earn or deserve.
Yeah. And I think that not just about salvation, not just about that moment of going, I don't deserve this for what you did, God, in sending Jesus, and Jesus, what you actively did, knowing what was coming, knowing because you'd seen people crucified, knowing what the Romans did to these people, knowing what was going on, crying to the Lord and saying, would you remove this from me? If that be your will, but if this is your will, I will do it. So knowing what he was going to go through, knowing that his father couldn't do that, take it away from him. Man, that just blows me away. And needing that revelation of going, he loves me enough to do that. And it's not about me. So actually this formulaic thing of wanting to do things, well, if I do this, this is what I'm going to get. No, actually, if he wants to give something to me, he'll give it to me out of his love and his grace and his mercy. That just flips it for me.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not about my works improving myself, and it's not about me praying a particular way so I can get something. It's about my Father knows what's good for me, and he wants to give good things. So trusting in that and knowing that when I'm weak, he's strong. Knowing that when I'm struggling with something, that he's gracious over me. When I'm beating myself about something and being really frustrated that I'm not being patient, or I'm not being kind, or I'm not doing these things that you so long to do and be, knowing that he turns to me and says, I see you.
Yeah.
My grace is sufficient, daughter. Don't beat yourself up. Come to me and I will fill you, and I will give you what you need. I think when you sort of brought toddlers up, no more am I seeing that I don't have an awful lot of the fruits of the Spirit in this season. Parenting young children and realizing those things, and yet knowing, hey, my grace for you, daughter. Come to me. I've got this for you. Just keep coming to me. My grace is sufficient for you. You've not failed. You're not miserable, mum. your grace is sufficient, and my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is working and will work better
Yeah.
when you're coming to me and recognizing that. Yeah.
So it's sometimes when we talk about grace, there's a set of people, a group of people who panic a little bit because there are rare occasions, some occasions where people, well, I hope they're rare, where people take grace for granted, where we push into an understanding that, well, I can do what I like because God's gracious. He's got to forgive me, therefore I can get away with anything. And that's not what we're talking about.
Nope.
That's not a healthy approach to grace, and that is just abusing what is kind of what we've received as God's grace. It's the author to Hebrews talks about crucifying Christ all over again. It's that, and you can't do that. So that's, let's put that to one side. I wonder what does a healthy approach to grace result in? What kind of life could we live if we understood, if you've had this revelation of God's grace? How does that transform us? And what does it look like to live a life of grace? Because I'm imagining that, as you were talking about our relationships and this not kind of bartering with God, not treating God like a vending machine, not thinking that I've prayed enough, therefore I deserve this. Actually, if it's all of grace, I was really challenged by that, because there's an element in human relationships where we do treat each other like that at times, in our base moments, in our tired moments, where we're grumpy and we, I've done this for you, I put the bins out and you haven't done this, or whatever the list might be.
Yeah.
And we're measuring all the time. It's not grace-filled. But what would a grace-filled life look like if we deeply had a revelation of God's grace? I think it would change everything.
Yeah.
It would change our capacity to love and kindness for others, because we'd receive deeply the grace of God. What else might result from that? If we genuinely, if this revelation to you that freed you in a time kept deepening and deepening and deepening, and it was for us a growing experience of living in God's grace. I wonder.
I don't think we'd live. I can't say we. I think if it continued, you can't live the same way that you live, and we can't live the way that the world is almost kind of got us living for ourselves. And I don't think that anyone intentionally does it. I think we're just in a culture where that's what everyone does. And we just seem to be in that. And before you know it, you're caught up in it. And I think all of a sudden the revelation of the grace, I honestly think when it wrecks you, you see other people with different lenses. Like you said, you'd be able to love deeper, of course, because all of a sudden you just look at people and go, hey, I want to love on you. I want to help you across this journey that you're in. I want to kind of say to you, listen, don't beat yourself up. Hey, let me help you journey this. Let me help partner with this. I think we would see the world differently. I think we'd see each other so differently that, like Jesus saw people differently. I'm always so blown away by the fact that he warned Peter what was going to happen. Peter, your passion here. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And he's like indignantly, never. I love you, Lord. He was so for Jesus. 3 years he'd literally lived in his back pocket and was sold out for him. And yet Jesus tells him, dude, what's coming? You are actually going to deny that you know me. And Peter did it. And I can only imagine how wrecked he was. I can only imagine how he was so broken. And yet Jesus sees him and he asks him the 3 times that he denied him. He asked him 3 times, do you love me? Do you love me? And gave him that chance to kind of go, yes, I do, with all of myself. And then goes and says to him, now go build my church, go. that's such that beauty. If we have the fullness of the revelation of that, how does that change the way we are for people out there?
I think Jesus would have been, has to be the greatest example of someone who's filled with grace
Yeah.
and understood the kindness of his Father
Hmm.
and a relationship with him. And I reflect on the lack of receiving God's grace that there is in my life at times, when it's so much is still performative. We want God to move more. We want to see more of God at work.
Yeah.
Therefore, what's the answer? Well, it's obviously praying more. It's obviously fasting more, and it's obviously, I've got a list of things I need to do, and if I do those, God will turn up, won't he? That's the deal. And we're still back in a stage of it's about me and my works, and Jesus did pray more, and he did, there was a devotion to his Father, but it wasn't earning him it. It came out of a revelation of what his relationship with God was, with his Father was. And it was the other way around. It's the relationship first, the revelation first, and from that flows the prayer and the being in his presence. And there's times when there's a young child who's suffering, who's afflicted, and there's this talk of demons attacking this child, and all sorts of damage that's being done, and the disciples can't get rid of this condition for the child, and people are asking why can't they do it, and the disciples ask Jesus, why couldn't we get this, these things out? And Jesus deals with it immediately, and he says this kind only comes out by prayer. And yet he hasn't prayed. It doesn't pray. He just deals with it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's interesting. But there's this lifestyle of prayer that's there, and Jesus doesn't seem on edge when people disturb him. He's gone away to pray. If prayer is the key, that we've got to earn results by praying, Jesus doesn't seem bothered when people come and his prayer time's disturbed and he's got to deal with the crowd. Good. He just deals with it because he's received a revelation of who he is and who the Father is and what he's walking in, and it's because of grace he prays. And I think I've got it wrong so often when I'm still trying to earn God's favour, still trying to be good enough, work hard enough.
Yeah.
At some level, not all the time, but there's a bit of that in me, I know. I
think in all of us.
Yeah. That you just think, what's the formula? Okay. And particularly with things that are beyond us. So revival, healing, when you've got people you love who are hurting and broken physically, and you long for them to be healed, you try anything.
Yeah.
And you try formula, and you try whatever, and I think it's natural, but it can drive you to difficult places and unhelpful places where we've moved so far from reflecting on the fact that this is God's grace and God's kindness that we need to rest in and live from.
Yes.
And so I wonder if this topic of grace could be not just for salvation. It's the continued relationship with Jesus that would change everything if only we understood it. And
you know what? The beauty is, as we were starting this conversation about seeking and finding, I think when we ask those questions, I do think he wants to bring the revelation of the truth of what it meant, his grace.
Yeah.
That, you know what? There's a lot of teaching out there, and I think teaching's great. But there's so many different interpretations and there's so many different things that we can sometimes, and I know this was one of the things that the Lord spoke to me about in my 20s. Jerida, what have I taught you and what have you grabbed up that's man's teaching? And I remember going, whoa, okay, hang on. Okay, I need a stop. And I took a very long season of reading nothing else but the Word of God, and being in a place of going, yeah, hang on. Lord, actually, we need to understand what it is that you're saying. And Holy Spirit, would you come and would you give us that revelation? And I think when we seek for that truth and say, Lord, would you show me what your grace really means? That it wouldn't be something that's a jargon word, or it wouldn't be something I've just read in the Word of God. and like you said, sometimes use disrespectfully
Yeah.
and use in a way to justify what we want to do. When we ask him and say, I want to understand what this really means. I understand your grace for the fact that I am forgiven and I'm now a son or a daughter. But actually, where's the deeper meaning of that you were talking over Paul here? Because at that point, Paul wasn't talking just about salvation.
Yeah.
He was talking about something much deeper.
Yes, that's right.
And I do believe that when we ask him that question, he's ready to answer. And I don't know how he answers that to everybody. And sometimes I don't even think I was asking for it. I don't. I was just trying a relationship with him. And his loving kindness was, I've got to show something because I need to stop you in what you're doing because it's detrimental. And I do believe it was detrimental to my relationship with him.
Yeah.
And he taught me a lot.
And I wonder if it took you to being in that, God met you when you were at a low point. And he so often does that. And I wonder if it's just because we've stopped. We've got nothing left. And maybe it's the first time he can. First time we're ready to receive him. Because up until then, we've been busy doing what we think is the right thing. And finally, it's as if God says, okay, now you've paused.
When you come going, I've got nothing. The amount of times I've had conversations with people I love dearly, and I've had them myself, when it's like, I've got nothing left.
Good.
Yes, exactly.
Now let's see what God will do.
Now then there being a place where I feel like at that moment.
But having nothing left is scary.
Yes.
You feel broken. You feel it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And yet it's the key to breakthrough
It
again and again.
Into so many questions. Am I strong? What did I really believe in? What have I been doing? It throws all of these things in the air, and yet I sincerely believe there is a smile over the Father's face that says, and now. Yeah. And come now on. I can come in and show you that I love you. Yeah. And this is what I want to do for you. And it's not, this is what I want to do for you like a cash cow. Now I'm going to answer all your prayers in one thing. It's that place of going, and now I want to come and be with you and show you myself in a deeper way. And
maybe that's why Paul writes, this is why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong.
Amen. And it would be lovely. That is in 2 Corinthians 12. If anyone wants to go and have a little read of that, it's 2 Corinthians 12. And Paul knew a lot about the grace of God. And to me, that is so beautiful when he cried out 3 times, would you take this ugly bit? This
whatever
thing
it is.
that is really hard for me. It's in it, you can so when you read that you can so relate to it. Whatever it was, whether it's attitude, whether it's a physical thing, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. The heart of Paul saying, I went and I begged him to remove this from me.
We wonder about our unanswered prayer, don't we? And this wasn't unanswered because God did answer. He said, no, I'm not going to remove it. My grace is sufficient for you.
And boy, wasn't it for Paul?
Yeah.
Time and time again. So this whole word grace, I think as followers of Jesus, we need a revelation of what it really means from the Father.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing yours, Joida. That was really powerful and profound, I think, to hear you talking about how this has been a revelation for you. Of something that's deeply impacted your life and brought you into freedom. And I pray that would be increasingly the case for people listening, but also for us too, that we might live in that freedom of knowing God's grace. And it would be not just something that's a word that's bandied around and sung and becomes a trite little saying. But it's got to be a revelation. It's got to be something that sinks down deep. Or as you said, that your feet are covered in concrete. You know, it's that kind of, it's that solid
Yeah.
that we've understood it. And so for us, for you, if you're listening, we pray that you might know the goodness and kindness and grace of God, who gives without us deserving it,
Yeah.
who meets us when we're looking for him, when we don't even know we're looking for him,
Yeah.
but we're searching, we're longing, we're broken, we're weak. We find that he meets with us there, far much easier than when we think we've got it all together and we're busy doing it by ourselves. It's in those moments where we think we've got nothing left,
Yeah.
and that we find he's everything we need.
Yeah.
And he's there with us and there for us. And so that's our prayer for us and for you, that you might find the grace of God more and more in your life, day by day, and be transformed in that too.
Amen to that.
Amen. Well, there we go. I think that's possibly us for tonight.
I mean,
So
I think we could probably have carried on, but I love that to end it just like that. I think it's beautiful, Stuart. And yeah, hey, seek, knock, the door will be answered. He will open it. His scripture constantly says about that. So if you're not sure or there is something going on, hey, he's there.
yeah,
He hears you. Stuart, thank you.
thank
And
you.
I look forward to what you're going to bring next time to the table. I did it this time. It's your turn next.
Oh, I'll have to find someone to interview instead. No, we'll get something very quickly, I'm sure.
Wow. Have a good couple of weeks and good night.
Good night.